Okay folks, the plant you see here with these pretty little leaves is Mustang Grape. I'm going to do a bit of a Mustang Grape grow guide, at least my best attempt at one, for how I get these things going in my permaculture garden. You can buy cultivars of Mustang Grape if you want to go that route, but I want to tell you how I did it. I went around and hiked around my neighborhood, around private land, and found fruit-bearing, which would be the female plants, Mustang grapes, and harvested the grapes. Came home. What you need to do is you need to pop the seeds out of every grape. You can keep the meat and make jelly with it if you wish, but then the seeds, you remove any flesh or meat off of them, because it actually does hinder them from sprouting. And then you let them dry, and then you can bring them outside after that and plant them. I only planted them probably about just enough so the birds don't see them. So what is that? At most a ½ inch deep. And I just planted them all down this line. Now Mustang Grape likes moist soil. So if you have like a creek, you can plant them along the side of a creek, or you can plant them around a pond. That would be fantastic. You don't have to worry about this next part that I'm going to tell you if you do that. If you don't have that, then I would advise planting them in shade, because when they're young, they need a pretty good amount of water to get established, to get large. So when I first planted these, I had Mustang grapes. I had them sprouted like, I planted 200 seeds, 300 seeds, and they all sprouted pretty much, and they just all grew down this line. At this point, only like 4 or 5 of them have survived, because early on I didn't do any supplemental watering, or I did very, very little. Once I noticed that they were dying because of the dryness, I did start watering, but I just never could keep up with it. It was never enough, except for these few that made it. So early on, when they're small, they do like the shade, especially if you don't have really moist soil. Now, on the soil, whether you have clay or you have sand, doesn't really matter. They will grow in clay, they will grow in limestone, they will grow in sand. What's more important is that they have water, at least early on. Of course, they do need sun like any plant, but you probably want to protect it when they're young, at least, from the most direct rays of the sun during the hottest part of the day. When we're having 107, 110 degree summers, and like in this case right now, it's June, it's been a month without water, no rain at all. And we've had a week of 107 degrees. Those little young plants just can't take it. So if you do plant them in sun, try to do it in such a way that they'll be guarded from the heaviest rays. So the reason why I keep filming over here is because I do have some smaller plants here, and over there growing up. So next they're going to need a trellis. They have to have something to climb up of. So whatever you choose for your site, make sure they can climb. In my case, I've chosen a live-in trellis, which is a ash juniper trees and some passion flower vines mixed in with that, a little bit of artificial trellis here and there to help it out, and cedar elms for them to grow up. I prefer living trellis, but you know, make your own choices. Okay, so we've covered the soil, we've covered their water requirements when they're young. When they get older, once they get established, much like a large tree, you don't really have to give them a ton of water, but of course, the more water they have, the more grapes they will produce. And whenever I was mentioning you saving the seeds, I should mention that they are dioecious. But it gets complicated. So you have male plants, you have female plants, and then you also have plants that are monoecious. They have both male and female parts in their flowers, and they can self-seed. That does happen with Mustang grapes. And incidentally, it also happens with Muscadine grapes that way. A lot of wild grapes probably have that feature. Now, like I mentioned, you can go buy a cultivar, which will guarantee that it's a perfect flower. So that way you don't have this problem. But if you're going to do like I did, and you're going to grow them from wild seed, just keep in mind, plant a lot of plants, because only the females are going to produce fruit. And you do want to have a male plant in close proximity to any female plants you have. So it's not like the males are worthless. But in the wild, male plants outnumber female plants substantially. So just keep in mind that if you plant from seed, chances are you're going to get a majority of male plants. So plant a good amount of them, and it takes several years before they express, before you finally know whether or not you have a male or female plant. And that's where the water comes into play. The more resources they get, the more sunlight, the more water they get, the faster they will mature, and the sooner you'll see flowers and fruit. So I've seen these plants not produce in a drought year. They just won't produce any fruit. They won't produce any flowers. So to be able to tell what sex they are, make sure you give them all the resources they would want. Now, you may say, well, you said that sun helps, and earlier you said plant them in the shade. Well, if you ever look at these plants, the grapes actually get produced in the sunny parts where the plant emerges. So in their natural habitat, they'll often grow in a forest understory, in a moist part of the forest, and then they will grow up a tree, and then they'll reach the sun, and then whenever that part that reaches the sun is usually the part that produces the flowers and the fruit. So you ideally want as much of this plant in the sun as you can. And that does present a challenge. Like when they're young, if you have a dry spot, you have to grow it in the shade to make it easier for the water resources to use. It depends on your soil too. You know, if you've got soil that holds water really well, maybe it's really fertile, maybe it's not as much of a problem. But if you have really sandy soil and it drains a lot, or like in my case, rocky and clay soil, and it's hard to get it hydrated, then, you know, planting in the shade really does help. And using mulch, of course, also helps. So what I do is you try to plant it in a place where it's shaded when it's young, but very quickly and easily it will be able to get sun when it's older, that is one good thing about the site that I've chosen here. When they're lower than about a foot, then they actually do get shaded decently. The ones out of the whole line that I planted, hundreds that sprouted, the ones that lived were the ones that have a bit of shade during those really hot sunny parts of the day. Now, in terms of your soil, like most plants, the richer the soil, the better. But if you're in the cross timbers region of Texas, or just about anywhere in Texas, just about any soil will do. The fertility of the soil is not as important for producing grapes or to get the plant to grow as like the water and the sun requirements, because these things are native plants. They are adapted to our soils, and they can largely get the nutrients they need out of our soils. All right, so good luck going out there and trying to grow your own Mustang grapes. I encourage everyone to spread as many native plants as they can. And the grapes, they're not really very tasty. I wouldn't advise eating them, but they're great for pies and jellies and such. I would say if you want to eat your wild grapes, try to grow muscadine. Muscadine is a challenge in the cross timbers region of Texas because of how dry it is, and it's in the environment. It's not really the muscadine's native environment, but for taste, I would say maybe try growing muscadines instead of Mustang. If you just want to pick them off the vine and eat them, Mustang grape is not the grape for you. But Mustang grape wine, absolutely delicious. All right, you have a good one, folks.